Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week, we dig into two cases of executive branch overreach that threaten to touch every American's life. In the second half of our show, Nima Gulani from the American Civil Liberties Union discusses the history, current practices, and potential reforms of domestic spying. Up first, we have Jeff Hirsch, a cigarette and candy distributor from Long Island, whose life was turned upside down when the Nassau County Police, working with the IRS and U.S. Attorney Loretta Lynch's office in New York, confiscated the assets of his business without charges. Jeff is joined by Larry Salzman from the Institute for Justice, leaders in the fight against civil forfeiture abuse, who's suing to get Jeff's money back. Jeff and Larry, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you for having me.
Larry, let me start with you. What is civil forfeiture? How is it supposed to be used to fight crime? And how has the law actually evolved in practice?
Well, civil forfeiture is the government's power to take property it suspects of being involved in a crime. What that means is it doesn't have to charge any particular individual, let alone convict them of any crime, to take the property. It just has to suspect that the property has been involved in a crime. And what we've seen over the years is a massive growth in civil forfeiture. Originally, the laws were aimed at taking property from big criminals, organized crime, drug kingpins. Going further back than that, it was used during Prohibition. It was used a lot in customs law, even at the beginning of the country, where, say, pirates were operating on the high seas and they couldn't get jurisdiction over them in U.S. courts, so they would just take their property. It's morphed into something completely different, where now even legitimate businesses are having their property taken just because they deal in too much cash, or cash is being taken by police and other law enforcement agencies when people get stopped in roadside stops for things that it was never intended to be used for.
So, Jeff, you've been caught up in this. I understand you and your brothers run a small business on Long Island. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
We run a business called Bi-County Distributors. We've been here on Long Island for 27 years. It's a family business. It's me and my two brothers.
What sort of stuff do you sell?
We sell tobacco products and candy. And we've been doing this all our life.
And who are your typical customers? Is it like convenience stores and supermarkets, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's delis, gas stations.
Smaller retailers?
Yes.
And you guys run a route every day and drop off the stuff and pick up your payments?
Yeah, me and my brother Rich drive our vans every day, Monday through Friday. And we make all our deliveries. And then we come back to the warehouse, make phone calls, and make the orders up for the next day.
And I understand to a good extent it's a cash business?
Yes.
Have you ever been audited or run into trouble with the IRS before?
No. Never been audited in 27 years.
So you pay all your taxes. There's no issue of tax evasion that you know of?
No. You see, in the tobacco industry, we send all our information to New York State so they know how many cigarettes we're buying. Our sales. We send cigar reports up to the state so they know how many cigars we're buying, purchasing, and how many we're selling. So everything's tracked.
So it's very closely monitored. I guess they worry about cigarette smuggling too, so that's one of the reasons they keep track of everything.
Yes.
And never had a problem?
Never a problem.
And have you been working with the same bank for a long time?
Yes, we were working with Long Island Commercial for a while.
Ever had a problem with the bank, until this?
No.
Did they ever tell you that there was an issue in the way you were doing your business?
No, not at all.
Did your accountant ever tell you there was an issue?
No.
When did all the trouble start?
It was a Monday morning in May of 2012. My brother went to the bank, and the teller told him, I don't know if you want to deposit your cash and checks today because your account has been seized by the government.
Just the teller told you this?
Yes.
You never got a knock on the door from the sheriff? You never got a notice? Just the teller said your account's been seized?
Yes.
Did he tell you why?
No. She didn't know why. Nobody knew why in the bank. So when he came back and he told me, I started to make phone calls to the bank. And they really didn't have any information for me on the local level. But then about an hour went by, and the mail came, and that's when we got the letter.
And what did the letter say?
That our account has been seized.
And who was it, from the IRS or was it from the Nassau County Police?
Nassau County Police.
The Nassau County Police, okay. And what did they tell you to do?
So there was a phone number on there, and I called the person that was in the letter, and he told me that the account was seized because something could be going on in your business.
That's pretty vague.
That's when he goes, if you want me to come down, maybe you should have a lawyer present. And that's where I knew it got a little more serious than what it was. So I got off the phone with this person, started to make phone calls to find a lawyer, and I found Mr. Potashnik in New York City and gave him the phone number, and then he started to inquire what was going on.
Now, how much money did they seize?
$447,000.
Holy! How did you run your business without that money?
We've been in the business 27 years, so we've made friends in this business, and everybody's helped us get through this, the past 2.5 years.
So you've had to rely on the mercy of your creditors?
Yes.
Good Lord. And they've held on to your money for 2.5 years now?
Yes.
Let's go through that one bit at a time. So when you first met with the police, what did they say?
I never met with the police first. I met with the lawyer.
Okay.
And he was making all the phone calls to them. I didn't meet with them. It had to be like a year after.
A year?
Yes.
Was there any communication in that year between you and the police? Was there any hearing? Did you go before a judge?
No.
No. They just took your money and have a nice day.
Yes. Yeah.
In America.
And the lawyer that was representing me was very frustrated in what was going on because he wasn't getting any answers.
So they didn't ask you to report someplace? Was there a lawsuit you could file to get your money back?
Well, that's what he was trying to do. Mm-hmm. In the time I had Mr. Potashnik.
Huh. So, Larry, you're representing Jeff and his brothers now. What are they accused of?
Well, that's the most shocking thing. When people hear the word forfeiture, they probably think of criminal forfeiture, where the government takes the proceeds of a crime as part of a punishment. But using civil forfeiture laws, the government is taking your property just based upon a suspicion that the property is involved in a crime. They don't have to charge you with anything at all. And in fact, they have never alleged that Jeff or his brothers have ever broken any law or done anything wrong other than deposit their money in what they deem to be a suspicious way.
So he's never been charged with anything? There's never been a hearing on breaking the law? They just have the money?
Never been charged at all. Never even been alleged that he's done anything wrong in any formal way by the government. And I think that's one of the most important points to make is that civil forfeiture laws have this appalling lack of due process. Once the government targets your property and takes it, it can take months, and as you've heard in Jeff's case, it's now been years before anything was filed by the government. They still have not filed anything. We've actually sued them to try to force them into court, but the government has not filed anything. So somebody whose money is taken waits years before they get in front of a judge to contest the seizure.
Well, what does the law say about how long they can hold your money before they have to give it back, unless they charge you actually with a crime?
We filed our own lawsuit against the federal government, the U.S. Attorney General or the U.S. Attorney's Office and the IRS that seized the money because they've broken the law in this case. There was a Reform Act in the year 2000, the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act of 2000, which put down a strict timeline for the government to say that if you take somebody's money, like they've taken Jeff's money, you have to give them notice that you've taken it, that you intend to forfeit it, and you've got to file a complaint within 90 days. They've waited now more than 2.5 years with this company over barrel.
So, Jeff, it's been 2.5 years since they took your money. The Institute for Justice is on the case now and has you in court trying to get that money back. Has anything else happened to you since then? Has the IRS audited you? Are you starting to feel pressure from other directions?
Yes. In the 27 years, nothing's been going on here. And just recently, we just got an IRS audit for the year 2012. So
now you have to go through the expense of defending yourself in an audit?
Yes.
All right. Do you have any expectation that there's going to be any problem there?
The audit's been going on right now for the last 3 months, and there's been no problems. Everything's been checking out okay.
And how's your business doing all this time?
We're hanging in there. It's been tough. It's a lot of stress day to day in the business. We play catch up in the bank during the week. We lower our inventory here.
Have they advised you to deposit your money differently so this doesn't happen again?
They really haven't told us to do anything. But we did change our practices a little. We put a little more cash in the bank. We still pay our suppliers cash and third-party checks.
So they can swoop in and do this again if they want.
I hope not, because we've been doing nothing wrong to begin with.
So, Larry, if you can sue to get the money back, can you sue for damages?
Well, it's very difficult to sue the government damages on something like this. You know, let me try to explain maybe what's been going on, Jeff. Federal banks are required to file reports with the government when you make a cash deposit of more than $10,000 in cash.
Right.
He deals in cash a lot. He's depositing cash a lot. The law also says that if you make smaller than $10,000 deposits for the purpose of evading these reports that banks normally file with the Treasury, it's called structuring. That's what the government has said he's doing because he makes a lot of small deposits.
And that's a crime.
You're structuring your deposits, and we're going to seize your money for that using civil forfeiture, even if we never charge you with any crime.
But wait, no. But if structuring is a crime, why don't they charge him with structuring?
Well, that's it. And that gets to another one of the big problems with civil forfeiture laws. Civil forfeiture laws have a much lower burden of proof on the government to take your property than a criminal charge. If they said you're structuring, they would have to show that he was actually structuring. And they'd have to prove it to a judge or a jury who could reject that charge on the basis of reasonable doubt.
And you'd be innocent until proven guilty.
All they have to do is say, we suspect you of structuring, and they can take the money using civil forfeiture, and that's what they've done.
And what can they do with that money?
Well, civil forfeiture has this direct and really perverse incentive in it, which is that the agencies that seize the money under federal law get to keep that money to pad the budget of the very agencies that seize it.
So they can take your money, they could not charge you with a crime, then they could share the money with the police and do whatever they want with it.
That's right. So the IRS will take this money, and if they succeed in the forfeiture, the proceeds of that forfeiture gets returned right to the Treasury Department to be used for other IRS or other Treasury enforcement agencies to do more forfeitures.
And they don't need congressional approval for that. They can basically self-fund themselves by taking money from the citizens.
It's hard to believe, but it is basically self-financing by these agencies. There are civil forfeiture laws that Congress has passed that allow them to do it, and that's part of why the Institute for Justice has gotten involved in these cases to stop that. It's plainly unconstitutional. It plainly violates due process rights, and it's just a bad idea to let law enforcement agencies directly benefit from money they seize from citizens.
Well, is this something that goes on a lot in Nassau County?
It goes on a lot across the nation, and particularly Nassau County is aggressive in this. Jeff mentioned earlier that the original letter he got, the original police officer he talked to was a Nassau County police detective. That's because in many areas, you'll get local law enforcement authorities that will join a task force with federal authorities, in this case the IRS. It's very easy to seize money using civil forfeiture under federal law. It can be more difficult under state law. So there's a real incentive for local law enforcement agencies to team up with the federal authorities. The federal authorities then forfeit the money, and then they kick back up to 80% of what they've taken as a bounty to the local law enforcement agencies who started the whole thing.
So, Jeff, have you had any more contact with the Nassau County Police since they took your money?
No.
None.
None.
Basically, the Nassau County Police took your money. The feds are holding on to it. They're going to share it with the Nassau County Police, and you have to sue to get it back.
Right.
That must be a lot of fun.
Well.
So, Jeff, as you've been interacting with the feds, have they offered to settle and maybe give you half your money back?
Yes, they tried to make a settlement with us. They went back to Mr. Potashnik with the settlement, and we refused the settlement because we've done nothing wrong, and we're not going to take any settlement from them because we've done nothing wrong.
And Larry, is it common for people to settle?
In fact, it's very common. We've looked at hundreds of these structuring cases, civil forfeiture cases involving cash deposits like Jeff is involved in, and the average is very low. It's in the range of $35,000, which puts people in a difficult position.
Wow.
It can cost much more than $35,000 to defend this in court, And so most people just find it better to settle and get some of their money back than try to fight it in court.
How common is this nationwide?
2012 is the last year I have statistics on it, and there were about 640 of these just structuring cases alone brought. There were thousands and thousands of civil forfeiture cases in which they took cars, cash, and houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read about it in the paper all the time. So what are our legislators doing about this?
Recently, there has been some talk of reform, which we certainly welcome. A bill was introduced by Rand Paul, and that was in the Senate, and I saw that a bill was introduced by Tim Walberg in the House of Representatives on the federal level. Those would certainly help. There has been some reform at the state level. Minnesota, for instance, most recently, is probably a leader in this reform. They abolished civil forfeiture entirely and only allow for criminal forfeiture. You can only get property once you convict somebody of a crime in Minnesota now.
Which makes sense. You committed a crime, you got to give the property back.
Absolutely, and it gives police and other law enforcement all the tools they need to do what we would hope they're doing, which is take the proceeds of crime or take money away from genuine criminals who've derived that money from illicit activities.
How much of this policing for profit nationwide is driven by policy out of the Justice Department in Washington?
The Attorney General has a lot of discretion over how much of this equitable sharing goes on. That's that program we mentioned earlier where the local law enforcement officers can team up with federal agencies. The Attorney General, for instance, could just say, we're not going to do that in certain classes of cases or where we don't charge with a crime. There's a lot of discretion over that. But the laws themselves, it's not just a matter of bad apples. It's the laws themselves that really drive the wrong incentives.
Mm-hmm. And I guess some districts are more aggressive than others. The Eastern District of New York is supposed to be a big-time player in these property grabs. Is that correct?
That's true. The Wall Street Journal reported recently that it was a very large user of civil forfeiture and forfeiture generally, both criminal and civil forfeiture. That's the office that's involved in Jeff's case, and that's the office that we are now in court fighting about this issue over.
And I know that Loretta Lynch, who runs that office, was nominated by President Obama to replace Eric Holder as Attorney General. Do you think this will come up in her confirmation hearings?
I hope so. I think if she's going to be Attorney General, I would like to know whether she approves of civil forfeiture, whether she thinks it's gotten out of control and the incentives are wrong, and what she would do to try to fix it.
So, Jeff, how has your family been holding up under all this?
It's very stressful. Not knowing how the business is going to go day by day. We had to cut back our credit out there with the stores so we could still survive in at by-county distributors.
Did you have to lay any people off?
No, because it's only me, my two brothers, and a part-time worker.
So a real family business.
Yes.
Has it shaken your faith at all in the rule of law in this country?
Yes, because an innocent family like ours that just do the everyday business, all of a sudden one day gets a letter in the mail and just changes everything.
How did you find your way to the Institute for Justice?
Actually, a friend of mine was watching Fox News one morning, and he saw Mr. Salzman on TV, and he says, this might be a good avenue to give a call to for your case. And that's what I did, filled out the application, and here we are today.
Larry, why did you take on Jeff and his brothers as clients?
Well, there's a tremendous injustice here that should be remedied. No one in America should lose their property without being convicted or even charged with a crime. And we saw this as a classic abusive civil forfeiture situation where the Hirsch brothers, Jeff and his brothers, have done nothing wrong, and yet the IRS sees their entire bank account and refuses to give the money back. And we looked at it, we thought, we want to help get that money back, and we want to create a precedent that will prevent others from going through what they're going through now.
And are you supporting them pro bono?
Absolutely. The Institute for Justice is the national law firm for liberty. We're leading the fight against civil forfeiture, and we represent all of our clients pro bono.
How can people find out more about IJ or support your efforts?
We have a website dedicated particularly to civil forfeiture. It's called endforfeiture.com, and they can find more information at our main website, ij.org.
How many of these are you involved in right now?
We have about a half a dozen civil forfeiture cases that are either beginning or recently ending or in the middle of.
So you've got a pretty steady flow of these.
We do. We have a big fight going on in Philadelphia. We have a case on appeal out of Michigan. We had a case in Massachusetts involving a hotel that we won not too long ago. And, we're interested in more of these cases where we see abuses.
Well, I hope people who end up in the same situation as Jeff and their brothers reach out to you for help. Jeff, Larry, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Jeff Hirsch from Bi-County Distributors with Larry Salzman from the Institute for Justice here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. To send us comments and feedback on this or any of our past shows, visit realclearradio.org and click on the email Bill link. Real Clear Radio Hour is a partnership with Real Clear Politics, one of America's top political websites. I check it every morning for the latest news, polls, and political commentary. Ahead, Nimu Gulani from the American Civil Liberties Union pulls back the covers on NSA spying and looks at hopes for bipartisan reform. Stay tuned.